From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Jane Mulkerrins. Two years ago, in a leafy suburb of North London, on an otherwise ordinary day, Jenny Kleeman was at home, about to take a test that could change the fundaments of what she knew about herself.
I was sitting exactly where I'm sitting right now, Jane, talking to you. I took an ancestry test and a 23andMe test for my radio show. They both came in these very enticing little boxes. Opened up the box, and you have a kind of little plastic vial that you're supposed to fill with saliva up to a certain level, and you think, that should be easy. But I was recording myself doing it at the same time, and I suddenly had an incredibly dry mouth. It was very difficult to produce that quantity of saliva.
It's the pressure.
It's the pressure, and there were lots of bubbles, and you had to make sure it wasn't bubbles. It specifically says in the. So it's not as simple as you might think. You spit into a tube, you send it off. No, you have to really, really produce a lot of saliva, seal the little test tube up, put it in the mail bag, and send it off. And then you get all of these text updates that are really enticing. You get one saying, we have received your sample. And then one a week later saying, we are analysing your sample. And then you get one telling you that your results are going to be ready soon. And then eventually, after a few weeks, an email drops into your inbox with the result.
Millions of us have done similar tests. Around 1 in 5 Britons, and I'm one of them too. And we do it to find out things about our health or where we come from. But now, one of the key companies behind these tests has gone bust. And that leaves the DNA of its 15 million customers available to the highest bidder. So what are the privacy issues when a company that owns our most personal information, our DNA, collapses? And are we entering an age where our genetic anonymity is over? The story today, the downfall of 23andMe. Jenny, can you introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
My name is Jenny Kleeman. I am a journalist, an author, and the presenter of The Gift, a BBC Radio 4 series about the extraordinary truths that can emerge when people take these at-home DNA tests.
And you've just told us, Jenny, about these 2 different DNA tests that you took. What were you hoping to find out?
I was hoping to be very boring. I wanted the story that my parents told me about who I am to match what my DNA says. And I very specifically chose to not find out about health information. I didn't want to know if I had the BRCA variant that's linked to breast cancer or anything to do with a propensity to Alzheimer's. Really didn't want to know that.
And so after you received all of these tantalising little messages updating you that your results are being analysed, what did you actually see when they arrived in your inbox?
Thankfully, I had very boring results. Was really, really happy about that. I saw that the story that my parents had told me was exactly the story revealed in my genes. I have quite an interesting ethnic makeup. People often ask me where I'm from because I don't really look English, but I don't really look like I'm from anywhere. My father is Ashkenazi Jewish, so Jewish from Eastern Europe, and my mother is Sephardi Jewish, so Jewish from the Mediterranean. And people always think that I might have some Middle Eastern genes in me, but my results came back saying, I was a bit Spanish, a bit Italian, a bit Greek. So the story that my mother had always told me about where she was from actually turns out to be true, even though I might look a bit Middle Eastern.
See, I don't think there's anything remotely boring about those results. I, however, got the most incredibly boring results when I did 23andMe. So I did it because I was offered it for free by my healthcare company when I was in New York. I had sort of always thought that perhaps even though my family are all from Ireland, there might have been a little bit of Spanish in there from the Armada. There were all these kind of stories about, especially the West Coast where my family are from. So, we kind of thought we were quite exotic. I have got the map for you, Jenny, to show where my ancestry is from. And as you can see from this printout, it's literally located in one very, very tiny corner of Western Ireland, which is just all dark blue. My results say I'm 100% Irish, literally nothing else in there. It's like the most boring episode of Who Do You Think You Are that you've ever seen.
Yes, but that's what it can tell you now. The whole point is with these DNA tests is you never know who's going to take a test in future and say, actually, I'm your half brother or your half sister, and blow what you think you know about yourself apart.
So, Jenny, we've both done these tests. Mine was back in 2020. But when did you first come across 23andMe in particular?
I'd known about 23andMe for years just because I write a lot about the intersection between tech and humanity and ethics. So it was always on my radar. And then I think around 2019, my sister bought my dad a 23andMe DNA test for Christmas because it is the gift for the person who already has everything. It's the sort of thing you give your parents. And a lot of retired people start exploring their family tree. And then I did a few stories about fertility fraud, about fertility doctors who had used their own sperm to impregnate their patients without their patients' knowledge or consent. And then I began to realise that there was a kind of common thread that now enough people have done these DNA tests that extraordinary stories are emerging. Secrets assumed forever hidden are suddenly coming out just because there is this enormous database existing in the cloud of our DNA. So I started to use that as a kind of narrative framing tool to see what other stories, what other revelations are emerging just because we're all taking DNA tests.
So the latest news is this company in particular, 23andMe, which isn't the only company that does DNA testing, we should say, but this company is now filing for bankruptcy. We'll get back to that in a minute in terms of what it could mean for the privacy rights of you and me and the 15 million other people who've done it and have given up their genetic data to a company, essentially. But let's rewind for a minute. What exactly does the company do?
It's one of the biggest names in DNA testing, and it's a very specific brand because it promises to unlock the health secrets contained in your genes. So your health future, your proclivity to certain diseases and conditions. You don't just learn about your family relationships, but you learn about things like how likely it is that you're going to like coriander, how much you'll be scared of public speaking, all sorts of strange things that I never thought a simple genetic test could tell you.
So how and where, Jenny, did the company start?
It was founded in 2006. It's a big Silicon Valley startup, and it was founded by Silicon Valley royalty, Anne Wojcicki, who was a former Wall Street analyst.
I grew up in academia. I always thought I'd end up being an academic. I went to a job fair right out of college. My parents made me go, and I got this job offer to go on Wall Street. And it's one thing I always tell young people, like, you never really know what's going to come your way.
Yeah.
Like, just take every opportunity. And I loved it.
And she saw an opportunity to sort of jump on this exciting new bandwagon offered by this very quick DNA sequencing technology.
It wasn't just about like trading and making money and doing these things, but it was like, I got to learn about companies. And so I got to know small cap biotechs and pharma companies and hospital systems and insurance companies. And I got to have like a really broad landscape of healthcare.
The idea that you could bring DNA testing to the masses.
So after 10 years of investing, I felt like I really understood the system, but the ship's just pointing in the wrong direction. And that no one's actually focused on keeping people healthy, and that I wanted to have a company that was frankly somewhat rebellious and was going to inspire people to try to really be healthier.
She used to be married to Sergey Brin, who is, of course, one of the founders of Google. Her sister, Susan Wojcicki, is probably the more famous Wojcicki. She used to be the boss of YouTube. So she's very, very well connected in Silicon Valley, a very smart person. She was a high flyer and really highly admired for a very long time. Apparently, she had a placard in her office that read, "I'm CEO." Highest paid female executive in Silicon Valley in 2022. Her salary then was an eye-watering $32.55 million. So she was a star and she knew it.
Wow, not an underachiever then.
Not an underachiever. And also in her personal life, she dated J-Lo's ex. I'm not sure if you know him, A-Rod. He's a baseball star, Alex Rodriguez.
So, Jenny, that's the beginnings of 23andMe. And obviously with a contacts list like that, she wasn't going to hold back on growing the company. So it's not really a surprise, is it, that it grew really fast? Tell us a little bit, though, about how it did get so big so quickly.
Well, the beauty is with a company like 23andMe is it appeals to different kinds of potential investors, pharma investors and also tech investors. So 23andMe had a huge number of big pharma and tech backers. GlaxoSmithKline, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the UK, made a $300 million equity investment in the company in 2018. 23andMe had connections to its chief scientific officer. It went public in New York in 2021. There was a merger with one of Richard Branson's companies, and that deal valued 23andMe at $3.5 billion.
So this company was incredibly big and incredibly exciting and at the forefront of something that people had a real appetite for.
Absolutely. I mean, there was an enormous wave of excitement about these DNA tests towards the end of the last decade. And it had a $6 billion valuation at its height. It had 15 million customers. It looked like the sky was the limit.
So we've got a multi-billion-dollar valuation. We've got huge and incredibly well-connected backers for this company. When did things start to unravel?
I think it was assumed that the growth was going to be exponential, but the business model that we're talking about here is take a test and it will unlock the secrets of your genes. And the thing is, you only do that once. You're not a return customer. Once you've found out what the secrets are, you know it. So unlike companies like ancestry.com, which encourages users to subscribe so they have access to cuttings databases, records of births, deaths and marriages, there's not a real reason to continue having a commercial relationship with the company once you've taken a test. So things began to kind of level off, and it began to look like 23andMe was a bit of a bubble.
And then there was a huge data hack, which didn't really help at all, did it?
There was a really huge and very worrying data breach in October 2023. Half of all of the people who had taken DNA tests with 23andMe had their accounts compromised. And a hack of your account on 23andMe or any company that has your DNA is a really big deal. This is not like having your bank account hacked. You know, you can change your bank details. You can change the key to your house. You cannot change your DNA. And it was really quite a sinister hack. I looked into this in quite a lot of detail. A hacker named Gollum said that he had the details of all the Ashkenazi Jews who had taken a test on 23andMe and was offering them to the highest bidder. He'd hacked this information in a really not very complicated way. He used a method called credential stuffing, which is basically he'd got hold of a bunch of old passwords and tried them out. 23andMe said there was no actual raw DNA that had got into the hands of these hackers, but he had people's names, sometimes he had people's pictures, their addresses, and how they're connected to other people. It's incredibly personal stuff. So it was very, very damaging for the company. There was class action lawsuits, a lot of people deleting their accounts. The company agreed to a settlement of $30 million, but it was more the reputational damage than the financial harm that really did it for the company. It made people wary of doing these tests. It made people realize how high the stakes are when you trust something as personal and intimate as your DNA to a company.
And did they crash its value at all?
It was disastrous for the company's value. It's worth about $25 million now, and that is about 2% of what the company was worth at its height.
Wow, 2% of its original value. Oof. So, Jenny, what happens next?
Well, the company's in a terrible, terrible situation. They're going to try and sell it and go private.
Gosh, do you think anyone wants to buy it?
Yes, I think many corporations will want to buy it because the company has incredibly valuable data. It has the DNA sequences of millions of people, and it has how people are connected to each other. It's valuable for research purposes. It could be valuable to health insurance companies. Life insurance companies would love to know the likelihood of different kinds of diseases and conditions. So data is more valuable than oil. And this is the most precious, intimate data that you can imagine.
So, Jenny, we've got this company which still has 15 million people's DNA data. What are the ethical concerns about that?
We don't know who's going to buy the company. I had a look at the privacy agreement that, of course, we all click through. And in fact, when I was taking the test, I really did read it. When you sign up to 23andMe, you acknowledge that you know that the company could go bankrupt, it could be bought, and that they'll have no control over who buys it. And a lot of people have ticked that box in exchange for knowledge about themselves. You never know who's going to buy it. You never know who's going to buy the company in 30 years or 40 years, or what the prevailing winds will be. Could it be used to deny you fertility treatment? Could it be used to deny you a mortgage? Could it be used to deny your grandchildren any of those things in the future? Could it be sold to a state who wants to control their borders according to the ethnicity of people as revealed in their DNA, or what their ethnic ancestry is? So the possibilities are endless for this data.
So are people trying to get back into the site and delete their data that's held there?
They are. And in fact, the site, I think, began to crash when news of the bankruptcy emerged. So many people were going on there trying to delete their data, and they haven't been able to get onto that page of the site because there's been so much demand.
And what's 23andMe saying about all of that?
23andMe has said it's going to continue to protect customer data as laid out in its privacy policy. But, as I said to you, the privacy policy is something that already allows quite a lot of leeway. It said that it was, I'm going to quote this, involved in a bankruptcy, merger, acquisition, reorganization, or sale of assets, your personal information may be accessed, sold, or transferred as part of that transaction. So if you've taken a 23andMe test, you have agreed to this. You have agreed to your genetic code becoming a commercial asset that will be sold on.
So, Jenny, we've got one of the world's most promising and now well-known DNA testing companies going bust. And this is raising various ethical issues about what happens to users' DNA in these scenarios. But first, let's find out a little bit more about some people who use companies like this and the shocking things that some of them have found out. Now, I know you've spoken to quite a lot of people. Tell us first, Jenny, about Joan.
Joan contacted me because she had heard my Radio 4 series, The Gift, and she thought that I might like to know about her family's experience with DNA testing. She told me that her son, Tony, had been given an ancestry test as a gift. He'd taken the test, and just like you and me, Jane, the results looked boring at first. He came from exactly the part of the UK and Ireland that he imagined he would. Cousins he recognised were there on his results. And his little sister was there with her date of birth. Everything looked exactly right, except the name was wrong. So he contacted this person. We've been referring to her as Claire. And he said, I see you've come up as my full sibling. There must be some sort of mistake with the test here. It'd be good to know who you are. And they started messaging through the private messaging service on Ancestry. And they quickly established that Claire had been born on the same day, around the same time as Jessica, the sister he had grown up with. And they determined that 52 years previously, there had been a mistake at the maternity ward, and Joan had taken the wrong baby home from the hospital.
So a simple switched at birth?
A complete switched at birth that would never have been discovered, was only discovered because somebody gave Tony a DNA test for Christmas.
And were their parents still alive when they discovered this?
Yes, the parents are still alive, and they took the results to the relevant NHS trust and said, what's gone on? And the NHS admitted liability. They said it was the first known case of baby swap in NHS history.
So Tony and Joan and Claire and Jessica, are they all family now to each other?
Well, it's been really difficult for them. Jessica, who, of course, grew up with Tony and grew up thinking she was Joan's daughter, has found this news really difficult to take, and she is now currently estranged from the rest of them. Claire, who grew up in really, really difficult circumstances, she grew up in poverty, she'd experienced homelessness. The parents who brought her up split up when she was 2 years old. She has become really close to her biological family. And, when you see their faces, as I did when I interviewed them, the resemblance is striking. You don't need a DNA test. So it's been bittersweet. Joan says she feels like she has two daughters now, Jessica and Claire. But I think Jessica has just found the news really, really difficult to deal with.
Yeah, that's understandable. Did anyone get any compensation from the NHS over this?
The NHS has agreed to pay them compensation. The level of compensation, I think, has only just been confirmed, and I believe it is being paid out anytime soon. But it's taken a very, very long time because, of course, how do you evaluate how to compensate people for a mistake like this? It's a total sliding doors moment that has affected two families in unimaginable ways.
And it's such a new frontier. No one's ever had to grapple with this before, have they? Jenny, separately, you also spoke to Andrew, who I know had connections to an unsolved crime. So this is a completely different family. Why did Andrew start looking into his past?
Andrew's father died when Andrew was 19, and he says he realised at the funeral that he just didn't know very much about his dad's life. His dad was American, Andrew's Australian, and his dad had been an orphan. He had grown up in an orphanage and he therefore didn't have family connections. So Andrew decided that he should take a DNA test, and he did a DNA test and got talking to somebody who appeared to be his uncle. And this person was being very strange and asked to see his father's death certificate, asked to see photographs of his father, but wasn't giving very much information about himself. And it's transpired that this wasn't his uncle after all. This was a federal agent in the US. And his father turned out to be a notorious criminal called Leslie Arnold, who, when he was 16, had murdered both of his parents and buried them in his backyard, and eventually got caught and had been put in prison. He had broken out of prison and had been on the run for 40 years. And it transpired that whilst he was on the run, he had gone to Australia, started a new family, didn't have so much as a parking ticket during that time. And so Andrew wanted to find out a bit more about his dad and found out that, yes, his father was indeed an orphan, but he was an orphan because he had murdered his parents.
It's like a true crime novel, isn't it? Why was he talking to a police officer masquerading as a member of his family? Have the police managed to infiltrate DNA databases too?
He wasn't really masquerading as his uncle. What had happened was the police had got his uncle to give a DNA sample. And of course, his uncle wanted to find Leslie Arnold, his full brother who had murdered their parents. So the uncle had given his DNA to the police officer who was managing the account and corresponding with anybody who became a match. And that's how the police officer managed to get hold of Andrew.
It's fascinating. So, Jenny, so many of us, as you've said, are doing these tests. And now with the sort of data privacy issue written really large now, thanks to this case of 23andMe, do you think that the age of genetic anonymity is gone?
It ended a long time ago. Anybody can be found. Anyone who thinks that they've got secrets that they can bury about children that they've given away, affairs that they may have had, crimes they may have committed, mistakes in fertility clinics and on maternity wards, they are all able to be uncovered now. And there's good and bad in that. For a lot of donor-conceived people who were conceived before anonymous donation was outlawed, this is an extraordinary thing. It's allowing them to understand their heritage. For a lot of adopted people, they're finding kinship for the first time. There's an incredible amount of good that can come from the fact that the age of genetic anonymity is over. But that's so long as this data set is in the hands of people who want to use it for good.
And will the collapse of 23andMe worry similar companies?
I think the other big names in DNA testing will be watching and worrying, but they will also be rationalising it. They will be saying there was a very high-profile data breach that was really bad for the image of 23andMe. They'll also be saying 23andMe had a very specific proposition, which was, we're going to tell you about your health, and the other DNA testing companies haven't had such a narrow focus. So they will probably be looking to optimise what they're offering in terms of heritage, family tree building, and the rest of that. But I think it's undeniable that there was a huge amount of interest in these DNA tests, which has certainly had its peak. Whether or not it's a bubble that's burst will remain to be seen.
Yes, and BlackRock, I understand, bought ancestry.com for a hefty amount in 2020 for 4.7 billion. So I guess that demonstrates there is some interest in buying these companies. And 23andMe, I guess, is at a pretty low price right now.
There's an extraordinary amount of data up for sale at a bargain price. I don't think they'll have trouble finding a buyer.
So, Jenny, does 23andMe still have your data?
It doesn't. Well, I think it doesn't, because I told it to delete my data. But this is the problem with these companies, is you never really know. We're trusting a company that's already not in very good shape when they say they have deleted the data. I've been told that I'll get an email when my data is fully gone. I'm still waiting for that email.
That was journalist and author Jenny Kleeman. Today's producer was Olivia Case. The executive producer was Kate Ford, and sound design and theme composition was by Mao Lassetto. I'm Jane Mulkerrins. Do leave us a review, it helps others to find us. And if you'd like to get in touch, it's thestory@thetimes.com. See you again soon.